Hello, and welcome to our online discussion of euthanasia, assisted suicide, and other ending-of-life practices for November 14th, 2014. My name is Amy Hasbrook, and I'm the director of Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet. We are a project of the Council of Canadians with Disabilities to unify, inform, and give voice to the disability rights opposition to assisted suicide, euthanasia, and other ending-of-life practices that have a discriminatory impact on people with disabilities. And I'd like to welcome you to our online discussion. There are many reasons why we oppose these practices, but some of the most important ones are that first, legalization of these practices is not necessary because everyone already has the option to commit suicide, to refuse medical treatment, and to have palliative care on demand, even to the point of palliative sedation. Secondly, to legalize these practices would be discriminatory because while non-disabled people who express a desire to die are given suicide prevention treatment and services, people with disabilities who express such a desire are encouraged to do so and enabled to do so where assisted suicide is legal. Thirdly, people who support assisted suicide say that it's a choice, but we believe that there can be no free choice to die as long as you do not have a free choice of where and how you live. And that is certainly the situation for most people with disabilities. And finally, the safeguards, where these practices are legal, the safeguards have been insufficient to prevent the deaths of people who should not die under such programs, because they're not eligible. So the goal of our online discussion is to give people with disabilities a place and a time that is our own in the debate. The debate is usually seen as between progressives on the one hand, who support these practices, and they are, the media often portrays them as those who support as progressives, and generally the media support assisted suicide and euthanasia as well. And they are set against religious conservatives on the other side, who do not necessarily agree with most of our goals as disability rights activists. So those of us with disabilities are rarely heard, and our experience with disability discrimination, with the devaluation of lives with disability, and with the medical industrial complex is ignored in the debate. And this forum is a chance for people with disabilities to talk about these issues. So that's why we're here. How to participate? There are several ways. Mostly, probably the best way to participate is either to go to YouTube and do a search on euthanasia and assisted suicide, and you'll find our online chats there. Or you can come to Google Hangouts on Air, and we are live, so you can select our Hangout. Or finally, the other option is during the week, you can look at our YouTube channel. If you're watching on YouTube, you can pose questions, and if you come on the Hangouts on Air, you can either be on air through video, or you can pose questions in writing, and I can answer those. If you have questions about anything you hear or see on our discussion, you can contact us in any number of ways. First of all, we have a Twitter account, which is @TVNDY. We also have a website, which is tvndy.ca. You can reach us on Facebook at facebook.com/Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet. Or you can email me at info@tv-ndy.org. So those are the ways that you can get in touch. Okay, today's topics are, first topic is accentuate the positive. We have a bunch of information about the debate over legislation is happening around the world, and there are several brief articles on that. We have one news brief and we have an announcement. So getting right into it. Among our goals, Toujours Vivant, Not Dead Yet, works to, first is to uphold the current prohibition on assisted suicide. And that is in the Canadian Criminal Code, which is section 241. To enforce the charter protections against discrimination on the basis of disability. And that's both in the Quebec Charter and the Federal Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And finally, to eliminate the factors that cause people to ask for assisted suicide and euthanasia. So those are some pretty proactive goals. Now, since we are often confronting efforts to legalize assisted suicide, both whether it's in the courts or in the legislature or in the media, we're often put in the position of being reactive instead of proactive. And that can cause our message to end up sounding negative and give us a negative tone, because frankly, we're being put in the position of saying, no, we don't want this. And I think that people sometimes see us as a negative organization, and without having anything positive to say or anything positive to offer. And that is a very frustrating part of what my job is, that we can't, that we don't have enough opportunity to talk about the positive things that we're working on, that we work on, and that we look for. Because when you're talking to the media, you only get 5 seconds or 10 seconds max to make your point, and you had better get as much in there as you can. And the arguments are pretty hard to make in 10 seconds. So today I want to highlight some of the positive aspects of our message. First of all is our name. Toujours Vivant in French means still alive, not dead yet in English, is an affirmation that we are alive despite difficulties, discrimination, and the fact that many people think we would be better off dead. And I think that's a pretty important thing to say, just to start with. We are still alive, that we have not been defeated. We haven't been I guess defeated is the word. So another thing that is a positive message and a positive thing we work toward is that we support real autonomy, and which in our definition, it means that if someone wants to end their life, his or her life, that person should do it on his or her own, not with help, not with, and that's why we don't believe it's right to bring in a family member or a doctor or a pharmacist or anyone employed by the state into that process, because first of all, as people with disabilities, we know that it is possible to end your life if that's what you really want to do, and that people do not need help to die. Dying is something that happens, and people don't need help to do it. It just happens. So it's if people are really talking about autonomy, they need to do it on their own. And as soon as you bring in another person, that's not autonomy anymore. It's somebody else influencing your decision and influencing the process. So that's what we mean by autonomy. We also support choice at the end of life. And that means that we emphasize that everyone already, as I said earlier, has the option to refuse medical care and to refuse to eat and demand palliative care, even palliative sedation. And it's important to make a distinction about continuous palliative sedation, because that doesn't give the person the opportunity to change their mind once they are sedated. So continuous palliative, if somebody is sedated and allowed to wake up periodically to take care of business or to talk to people, that's quite different from just putting somebody under and waiting till they die. We want but in terms of choice, we want people to have choices in life, not just choices in death. And that is a really important part of our mission. And as far as we see, we want people to have the full range of choices when they become disabled or develop a degenerative or terminal illness. And that means that the person is able to live at home with access modifications to their home and equipment and attendants that the person hires and trains to meet their needs. It means having access to proper health care, including accessible doctor's offices and equipment to diagnose and treat both ordinary and extraordinary needs. It means receiving effective palliative, effective pain relief, symptom management, and other palliative care services to ease the ending of life. And that's an important one, because in Canada, only 30% of people have access to palliative care. And doctors only receive 8 hours of training in pain management in their entire medical school curriculum, which is less even than veterinarians receive. So it's not something that doctors really know how to deal with, and doctors are frankly frightened of dealing with pain because it's not generally not something they can cure. They deal with the underlying cause. They don't deal with the symptom, even though the symptom can become part of the cause if it's not properly managed. Let's see. Having choices in life means that a person has peer and professional support that is free of negative messages about disability to help to deal with feelings of grief and loss associated with a terminal diagnosis or becoming disabled. And this is something that needs to be emphasized, because if you become disabled, you have to go through a grieving process. That's normal. You will feel a huge loss, and it's very few people that don't feel a loss. But if you are trying to go through that loss and people are saying to you, your life is over, your life is worthless, blah, 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 that's not going to help you get through the loss. But the problem is that most psychiatrists and psychologists have the same bias as everybody else. And so without good peer support or support from people who don't share those beliefs, you are not going to be able to get through the grieving process and get on to the next stage. And that applies whether you have a degenerative disease or a terminal disease or just a disability. And so to be able to get help without the negative messages is crucial, and it's not generally available. So that is one of the ways that choice is important. Being free from abuse, exploitation, coercion, and economic and social pressures is also another way to make choice a reality. If people are being coerced, they don't have choices. If people are being abused, they don't have choices. Their choices are being limited by somebody else. If people are facing financial or other family pressures, their choices are being limited by somebody else. And that is not going to be useful for that person. I hope this is still, yeah, okay. that means they're restrained, and that is something that we work to protect people against, those kind of against abuse and coercion. Finally, knowing that you are a valued member of your family and community and society is also an important part of having choices, because both for your internal self-esteem, if you're valued, you will feel that you have more choices. And if you are valued, you will have more choices, because employers will recognize your potential as an employee, and people in society will recognize your right to be out in public and to use the buses and to have access to all the goods and services that everyone else uses, rather than having this idea that you are causing a problem because the lift on the bus broke and people are being delayed. They often they get angry at the person with the disability rather than at the bus company because the lift is broken. And so that is what it means, how choice can be affected by people being valued as members of society. We also, another way to phrase what we do is in a positive way, and to highlight our positive efforts, is that we support suicide prevention programs and the policy behind it. That means that we want people with disabilities to have equal access to those programs. We value, it's a good idea to have suicide prevention programs. There are a lot of, it's well recognized that suicide prevention is a public health problem. And if you look at suicide assessment tools, one of the, a big contributor to potential suicidal problems is if somebody becomes disabled or develops a chronic or disabling condition. That's recognized as a trigger for suicidal behavior. So why people don't consider consider that a reason, not to allow assisted suicide is absolutely beyond me. But the campaigns such as You're Not Alone and It Gets Better are great campaigns to help people, to help prevent suicide. And campaigns like that, there should be things for people with disabilities to make folks feel valued. And if I had seen a campaign when I was a kid that said It Gets Better, that would have been really helpful for me, because I wouldn't have felt so alone in dealing with harassment by other students and bullying. That would have been very helpful, but be that as it may. So we support the assisted suicide movement and want inclusion in that. And finally, we also underline the importance of realizing the promises of equality and non-discrimination in the provincial, federal, and international covenants and charters in reducing the demand for assisted suicide and euthanasia. So there are a lot of documents out there that talk about the importance of equality for people with disabilities, and we think those are great, and we want those ideas to become reality, because if they do, then this will be a very different world. If people stop believing that it's better to be dead than disabled, that would be a very different world. There probably wouldn't be a push for assisted suicide. So that's one of the positive things we work toward. And those are some of the examples. I couldn't think of a lot more, but I was kind of pressured trying to do it fast. So those are some of the things I thought of as examples of the way we try to work in a positive fashion and express our message affirmatively. Okay, the debate over legalization of assisted suicide around the world. This week there have been, I want to catch up a little bit on some of the things that are going on around the world. In New Jersey this week, the Assembly approved a bill that would allow assisted suicide by a vote of 41 to 31. The bill now has to go on to the New Jersey Senate, the other house of their legislature, and then it would have to be approved by the governor. So there are two more steps. Last summer, there was a hearing about that bill, and many people with disabilities showed up for that hearing, and it had a great impact. But the legislators decided to postpone the vote on the bill until this fall, and the effect of seeing all the people with disabilities at the hearing had worn off by that time. So unfortunately, the ultimate upshot was that the bill was approved by 41 to 31, and that's too bad. In the United Kingdom, the last Friday, the House of Lords unanimously approved an amendment to Lord Falconer's assisted dying bill that would mandate requests for assisted suicide be approved by a judge. So if you, according to that bill now, if you want assisted suicide, you need to go before a judge. Now, I have to admit, I'm not sure what that means in terms of the bill actually, because all the accounts I read said that the amendment was approved unanimously, but I don't know if that means the bill was approved itself and it was handed off to the Parliament, or what that means. So I have asked some of my colleagues over in the UK about that, and hopefully we'll hear back. But either way, I will let you know about what's going on in the UK, because it's a very explosive situation there. It's the service cuts that have been happening there, the work capacity assessments that have been happening for the last 5 years have been very, very destructive. Many people have lost benefits who shouldn't have. There have been many suicides and many deaths. Even the day after somebody was approved, had their work capacity assessment, and, you know, even somebody received the letter that they were denied benefits and told they had to go back to work, but they had already died. Just horrible things are happening, and the public discourse is very, very negative toward people with disabilities in England. So it's not pretty, put it that way. In Germany, earlier this week, the lower house of their parliament debated in principle the issue of euthanasia. It looks like there will be a bill filed to allow assisted suicide in February, but this was just a debate on the question in general. While there were some groups who opposed the practice because of the history of the Nazi euthanasia program, there were also those who support assisted suicide. And it's a little strange to me because they just dedicated a memorial in Berlin to the victims of the euthanasia program. Nearly 300,000 victims of the euthanasia program are commemorated in this beautiful memorial. And one of the speeches given at that memorial was, we need to remember what not to do. And apparently some people have forgotten what it means to allow euthanasia and assisted suicide for a certain segment of the population. So there you go. In Australia, the Green Party Senator Di Natale has submitted a draft euthanasia bill to a parliamentary committee for recommendations, and those recommendations came back saying you have to do this, you have to do that. Mr. Di Natale is currently looking for sponsors to introduce the full bill in both houses of the parliament early next year. So he actually had wanted a conscience vote, asking members to vote on conscience. I don't know if he got it. Again, it's sort of hard to track the information when you're looking from halfway across the world. You don't always get all the information. So finally, in New Zealand, excuse me, before this year's elections, a bill that would have allowed euthanasia was withdrawn. Now that the elections are over, a Labour MP will be refiling the bill, probably later this year or early next year. Though the Labour Party's leadership race might stall the bill, the bill will probably be considered next year. So that also, there was a big push in New Zealand before the election, before the bill was dropped and to be picked up later on. It's already being refiled, or the person has already said a Labour MP has already said he's going to refile it. So it's just a matter of time. Okay. Excuse me, just one second. Excuse me another second. I have a friend who needs to come in. Yeah. Come on. Okay. I read this morning an article on the BBC website, or from the BBC, about an institution in Greece, which it described an institution, for children with intellectual disabilities and autism that houses the residents in wooden cages. And according to the employees, there are 6 people to care for 65 residents, and often there is only one person to care for 20 people at night, or when a child is being taken to a doctor's appointment because they don't have a doctor on staff. So if the child is injured, somebody has to take them, and then there's less staff to care for whoever is there. Excuse me, a doctor who volunteered at the institution said that the cages are an improvement on the old system where the children were tied to their beds, hand and foot, 23 hours a day. When I read this story, I was crushed and I needed a hug. And I said to my husband was saying, you shouldn't look at this stuff. It hurts you too much. And I said, yeah, but these are my people. And this is how people with disabilities are devalued. And when I was a baby, the social worker from the institution, or the state blindness agency, said that I should be sent to an institution. So, that's what it means for people in institutions. Maybe not now in the US, but in the US, there have been some pretty awful institutions and still some horrible conditions. And even now, a lot of people with psychiatric disabilities, mental illness, are being housed in prisons because there's no other place for them. They're among inmates who are violent, they're abused, and they are not getting treatment for their emotional difficulties. So, I can't say this doesn't, it's far away, because it's another version of what affects all of us with disabilities. And it's another version of the belief that our lives are not as valuable as others. And it's the same mentality that pushes assisted suicide. It's all connected. So that's just another example. So we have one announcement, which is that the Council of Canadians with Disabilities is having a forum entitled Disabling Poverty, Enabling Citizenship. and that will be held on December 2nd, 2014 in conjunction with the United Nations Day for Persons with Disabilities. The event will be from 9:30 a.m. to noon at the Delta Hotel in Ottawa. Admission is free, and translation, captioning, and sign language interpreting are available. For more information, contact CCD at their website, which is ccdonline.ca, or call 204-947-0303. Okay, in order to reach us, if you have any questions or interest in what we're doing, would like to get involved, you can go to our website, which is tvndy.ca. You can also go to our Facebook page, which is at facebook.com/toujours vivant, not dead yet. I have a Twitter account. You can follow us on @TVNDY, or you can email us at info@tv-ndy.ca. If you want to watch old prior editions of our online discussion, you can find them on YouTube, and all you have to do is search for euthanasia and disability, and we have discussions back from, let's see, we started in September of 2013, so we have that fall. We took a break in the winter, then we went all through the spring, we took a break in the summer, so and we restarted around the middle of August of this year. So we have many, many discussions. We are covering as many topics as we can. Last spring, we covered frequently asked questions that we have on our website, so there are many resources to look at. I want to thank you for joining us and invite you to come back again next week. So does the cat. Take good care. Thank you. Goodbye.